Okay, let's try number 5 here. Here's our candidate transcription. Let's take a listen.
The colt reared and threw the tall rider.
Yeah. So again, lots of good stuff in here. Let's listen to this very first bit.
The colt.
I don't have anything to say about the because it matches between my transcription and our candidates as well. Colt is kind of interesting.
Colt.
So first thing I'll point out is that this one is pretty clearly aspirated. So just make sure you're listening for that. But you can hear that H, that H right after the K. It sounds a little throat cleary, I guess, when you listen and zoom in on it. But that's what it is.
Colt.
So this person has transcribed Colt, which is fine. That's kind of what you'd expect in the O phoneme, I guess, for American English. In this context, though, before an O, so what can happen, or what basically happens with L in coda position after a vowel in a syllable, is that it tends to be O. It tends to be dark in American English, or at least my dad's variety of English, and probably yours too.
Colt.
O. So that means there's you're raising the back of your tongue to sort of superimpose like a O kind of articulation on top of the L at the front of your mouth. And it gives it what is called a dark quality, which is basically, well, we'll talk about what that means acoustically when we get into the second half of the class, but it's, kind of impressionistically dark as opposed to clear. Like Colt is O, that is the dark L. Colt would be the clear L. But what it does is it kind of like keeps your tongue back there.
Colt.
So the O doesn't kind of go into the normal diphthong mode that it usually does before that L. Old. So you don't hear Colt so much as hear Colt, and then just kind of like a long O. Old. And then here's the L bit. Back there. So, yeah, this is fine, but just watch out for that. It could just be like an O. I guess I can transcribe this as a long O as well here because it is however long this is. 162 milliseconds. So maybe a bit longer than normal O. But that's what's going on there. The reared right after it. Let's see. This is also kind of longish.
Reared.
Yeah, here's just the T here at the end of Colt, I guess. Also a little bit aspirated. You can transcribe it like that too.
Reared.
Yeah, so I'm using this curly QR here. This person is using just the upside down R. That's fine. Again, I'd encourage you to use the sort of retroflex symbol because that's basically what it is in North American English. Then there's a question, what exactly is this vowel in the middle here?
Reared.
We'll listen to that part of it.
Reared.
Okay, so do you hear this as an E or an I? We'll zoom in again.
Reared.
Yeah, it's sort of like conveniently in between the two, and then also with like R flavoring on top of it. So oftentimes this gets transcribed as what our candidate has here with the cap I. I transcribed it with an E, which is kind of the way I hear it. Rear. But there's always that R flavor in it, so it's kind of hard to like definitively match it up with either the tense or the lax version of that vowel. There's no distinction in English in this context between those two vowels.
Reared.
So either one is basically okay. It's just a funny little ambiguity that we have. Let's move on. But I would want you to transcribe that with that rhotic diacritic next to the vowel quality or the vowel symbol, regardless, because that's going to be there, especially in a rhotic variety of English like my dad speaks.
And through.
So here's our and again. Usually goes by quickly, and usually it's not like and when you say it in continuous speech.
And.
So it's maybe N again, maybe it's an. I transcribed it as an. It's a little ambiguous between those two, I guess you could say. It's not nasalized as much as you'd think it would be, though. So I left it not nasalized. Here's
through.
The through. One thing I didn't get in my own transcription, this is an interdental right after an alveolar nasal. It's likely that N might be a little bit dentalized. We can listen to it.
And
It's hard to hear that distinction, N versus N versus N. Yeah.
and
I don't really hear it so much there, so I didn't transcribe it, but you could put that dental diacritic there and it'd probably be appropriate.
through,
Yeah, my dad does something kind of funny here with this
through,
You might be able to hear that.
through,
Our candidate transcription is through, but he kind of flaps it.
through.
I can't get the ooh and the flap at the same time, but through. I'll just play it. He flaps his tongue there, so that's why I transcribed a flap there. That goes by quickly. It's, for obvious reasons you might miss it. But if you listen closely, it's there. Normally you'd probably expect just a through, an approximate, retroflex approximate. So this is reasonable as a transcription. The last bit here, the tall rider.
The tall rider.
We can kind of compare these as well. If you listen closely, I guess that the at the beginning of winds up being voiceless again. Yeah, again, this is something it's easier to see when you know how to read these representations than it is to hear. So don't worry too much about that. I do want to focus a little bit on this tall.
Tall.
Yeah, so number one, the T is aspirated again. And that's easy to hear. If you can just find where these voiceless stops are appearing in this recording and just zoom in on them, you should be able to hear if it's aspirated or not without too much difficulty. You can see it's just this mess here in the bottom part of the representation.
Tall rider.
And the vowel here could be transcribed as long, probably should be transcribed as long, but it's the ah.
Tall.
So it's this symbol rather than the open O. The open O would be more like toll.
Tall.
Yeah, and maybe it's a little bit ambiguous.
Tall.
It might be a bit of that aw, the rounded version.
Tall.
But I hear it as aw. And then there's the dark L right after it. So I've got that transcribed here as well. And then rider at the tail end.
Rider.
Yeah, so I'm all good with this transcription. In principle, there's stress transcribed on the first syllable, which is good. There's another brief flap in the middle.
Rider.
Or, yeah,
Rider.
May even goes by and might be a bit of an approximate. You get that
Rider.
in Spanish more than you get it in English, where kind of a flap can turn into an approximate in between two vowels.
Rider.
But the flap transcription is this guy over here on the left. And rather than the schwa R transcription, I'd rather use the syllabic R at the tail end because that's more appropriate. There's not really a schwa here at the end. You can kind of hear that yeah, like it sounds like yeah coming from the flap, or the I right before it. But there's not really a schwa here. I won't take off for this, but it makes more sense to use this notation. Yeah, that's all. I guess I'll say one thing. You can use the tie bar over the I diphthong here as well. If you want, you can't really hear that.
Right.
It just means that it's like one phoneme in the language. Yeah, I've gone through quite a bit here quite quickly. Listen to the whole thing once again.
The colt reared and threw the tall rider.
One thing also I'll mention is this person picked up on the long ooh.
Through.
In through. So good job there. How long is that? Pretty long. 225 milliseconds. So good job overall. We'll do number 5 next. I'll do number 5 next. Next up, number 5.